Right guys, today we're going to be doing a GS430 2000 to 2005. This one is going into a Lexus IS200. So, let's do this. Right, so as I said, this is going to be a GS430 2000 to 2005. That makes it the 3UZ with a 5-speed automatic gearbox. In this case, the customer is using a J160 6-speed manual gearbox. Now, obviously, because of that, we have remapped the ECU to remove all the automatic gearboxes, but we'll get to that as part of the testing. So what we're going to do today, first of all, we're going to go through the build process so you can see how we strip the entire harnesses down, remove everything that's not necessary, and add in what is necessary. So let's do that, and then we'll come back for this.
Never break, always fight, never quit, do it right, play the game, win it life, have no shame, there's no time, feel the pain, live the grind, I could change, in my mind, pick a lane, commit and climb, the only way to win it life, I never miss, that's fact, taking big swings, put your hand to the bat, put me in the ring, you'll go out in a bag.
Right, as you can see, as I said, we literally pull the whole entire harness apart and we remove everything that's unnecessary and we add in what is necessary. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through the layout of the entire harness, showing you where everything gets connected. So when you're installing this as the customer, you know exactly what's going on. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do testing, and it's going to be broken up into 2 sections. So we're going to have one with just the ignition on and one with the engine actually running as well. So, without further ado, let's get into the layout so you guys can see exactly where the harness all goes and you can see all the additions that we have made for it. So, looking over here, here is your ECU itself. Very simple. There's only 5 plugs, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, okay? All unique. You can't plug them in the wrong place, so really super easy to do there. We've then created a patch harness which will interface with the 2 standard IS200 plugs. So that's your 22 and your 28 pin plug over there. Nice and straightforward, that plugs in. We've then created the body plugs as they should be for an IS200. So we've got this plug over here. It's a blue bottom. This is the white one because the one that came with the GS430 harness. Then we've got the white one, or the actual white one over here. This is more like a cream/ivory if you want to call it that. Anyway, that goes into the gray one, and then we've got the black one which goes into the black one. Now, all 3 of these plugs are unique, so you can't plug the wrong one into the wrong place, so you don't have to stress there at all. Then you're going to see we have these 2 junction plugs, and if you take a look at the photos that I've done, what you will notice is I've actually unclipped this blue one, pushed it down into the box. I've put the white one, clipped it in place of the blue one, and I've taken the gray one and I've clipped it in over there. So these do clip in over there, and there you just need to remove that blue one and get it out of your way. All right. The last piece of the puzzle is going to be our rev counter adjuster, if you want to call it that, basically. So with the 3UZs, they give out a 4-cylinder signal, and we need to change that to a 6-cylinder signal. So that's what this little box here does. We do calibrate it here as part of the testing, but if you feel that your rev counter is ever so slightly out when you're looking at sort of OBD2 diagnostic data, then you can feel free to open that up and you can adjust it, and we'll have a video on how to adjust it. What I started doing now is in the bottom of the description, I'm putting loads of links, loads of part numbers for different parts to refresh the engines, etc. So if you go down in the description, you're going to see loads of information there for you guys as well. Right, so that's the ECU box. That's relatively straightforward. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ECU plugs. You've got 3 body plugs there, and you just plug in your 2 body ECU plugs from your IS200 into there. Really straightforward. Obviously, you'll notice that the ECU is sitting up right here. This is an IS200 ECU box. This is a different shape from the IS200 ECU. There are 2 options available to you. Number 1, you can take out these 4 screws, pull the PCB board out, and you can get an angle grinder and you can grind off that lip, and then the ECU will actually push all the way down. Option number 2, get yourself an IS300 ECU box because that had the exact same shape. Now, do be careful for you American guys. The 2000 to 2001 IS300 had the rectangular ECU, which is a similar fashion to the IS200, and therefore that one wouldn't work. If you're in America, you're looking for an 02 to 05 IS200 ECU box because that has the same shape of ECU as the 3UZ. Right, so moving along there, you'll see we've got our grommet over here, and that just slots directly in over there. Obviously, your lid will go on top of it like that. And as you'll see via the pictures at the end, you'll see exactly how it looks once everything's in there and clipped down. Moving along from there, the harness goes up along here to another piece of rubber that covers it over there. And then we get to the first of our plastics, all right? So there's a bunch of plastics that are bolted to the engine, which help route the harness around. So this first piece of plastic, you've got 2 bolts. You've got one there, and you've got one over there, okay? Plastic goes around there, and you have a couple of 3 openings in total. So your first opening is this one over here, and it goes to injector 1 and coil 1. Now remember, with these engines, left bank, which is this one over here, and right bank, which is the one over there. So depending on what side of the car you drive on. And obviously, if you're looking from the back of the engine, this is the left hand, that's the right hand. This is bank 1, that is bank 2. Bank 1 is all the odd numbers, so you've got 1, 3, 5, and 7. Bank 2 is all the even numbers, so you've got 2, 4, 6, and 8. Okay, just so you know exactly what you're dealing with there. So as I said, first breakout here goes to injector 1 and coil 1. Again, different plugs, so you can't plug them in the wrong way. Next breakout is popping out over here, and it goes to your oil control valve for your left bank. Goes a little bit further along and breaks out and goes to the TPS. Remember, this is a 3UZ 5-speed, so it has the TPS separate from the drive-by-wire motor. 6 speeds have the 6-pin plug on the side over there, just so you know which one you have, okay? Coming down over here, it then breaks out over here where you can actually clamp it down to a little fitting over there, and then it goes off to the cam sensor. So that's the front cam sensor over there. Then coming down over here, you'll see you've got 2 spots here to put clips in to keep the harness out of the way, and it goes around through there up to the top of here, and then it's going to break out into 3 sections for you, okay? So you've got your aircon pump over here, so that plugs in over there. Now, the GS and the SC430 aircon pumps are perfectly fine to use in the IS200, IS300 Altezza swaps because they don't have the solenoid on the back of the aircon pump. It's your LS430 that is the problem, the 2000 to 2003. It has a solenoid on the back. The very newer ones on the 6-speed, some of them don't even have a clutch on at all. They literally just using the solenoid to control the aircon. So those are very difficult and not ideal to be used in these particular swaps. You can obviously also fit the 3UZ VVT-i on here as well. It's absolutely no problem. It bolts directly up and it just uses the same 3-pin plug. So that's, again, an option for you guys. So that's that. Then coming through here, it's going to break down and it's going to go through there. And hopefully you can see where my finger is there. There's the wires going through there. It comes down through there and it goes to the crank sensor. Okay, so that plugs in the bottom down there. All right. Now, in this case, for a GS430, he's not going to have his oil filter housing here. His is actually going to be pointing backwards like that. So he would normally have his oil pressure switch wire coming from there, going out there and plugging in there. In this case, because we're using an LS430 motor, we've got this front-facing one. So you can see there is the oil wire, but obviously it's completely separate from the crank wire. And so that can come out here and then plug directly into his oil pressure switch, which will be facing backwards, not like that over there. Right, so that's that whole front section down there. So we're going to carry on to the top over here. So again, it's going to move around to there. Just going to swing around here. Move around to there. Then you see it breaks for a small little section over there. And then we get to our next piece of plastic. Again, there's 2 bolts holding it on. You've got that bolt over there and you've got that bolt over there. So super simple. Just need to bolt them down. All right. Now then, the first breakout that comes out of here, you've got 3 sections that are going to pop out here. You've got injector 3. You've got the cam sensor for the inlet cam on the left banks. Remember, because of the VVT-i, the ECU has 3 cam sensors. The one on the front is for synchronization of the ECU to know what position the engine is in. You have a cam sensor here and you have a cam sensor on the other side, and those are to measure the angle of the inlet cams. So the ECU is controlling the cam for the VVT-i with this oil control solenoid, and it's using that to tell it whether the command it's giving to that is achieving the desired effect, okay? So if you ever open one of these engines up, you'll notice that this inlet cam has a 3-tooth trigger on it, and it just spins around here, and that's what that is picking up over there. Okay, so back to that. So we've got injector 3, cam on VVL, which is what they normally call VVL or variable valve timing left, and then you've got coil 3, all right? Again, all 3 different plugs. Can't really get it wrong. And the way this box works, it kind of separates everything up, as you'll see in a second. Moving along there, then we come out here and we have another 3 plugs coming out here. So again, we've got injector 5, we've got coil 5. Now in this case, we have a noise filter. So these are built in as standard with these cars, and they can just be bolted to the inlet manifold. Basically, just a capacitor. What this basically does is it reduces electrical noise in your harness. Now the reason they do that is mainly for like your speakers in your car. It stops them like hissing and buzzing and so on and so forth. So again, if you've got them there, if you don't have these, don't fret, just tuck the plug away. They're not necessary for the engine to run. And if you have no speakers like it's a drift car, then you really don't have to be worried about it at all. Okay. Right, moving along from there, and then we're going to have the last breakout over here, and this is going to just 2 sections, which is basically Injector 7 and Coil 7. Okay. Nice and simple, nothing too complicated. It split everything up for you guys so you know exactly where everything goes. Okay, so these coarse injectors over here, then you have here, then you have here, then you have here. Nice and simple. Right, moving around to the back now, we then have the harness goes down along here, and we have the piece of the plastic that goes all the way along the back there. And again, that is held on with 2 belts, and hopefully I can see it here, but you can see one down there. And if I slide over here, you can see the second bolt over there, okay? So remember, this is a 3UZ engine, so everything is correct. Your 1UZ VVT-i actually has an extra mounting point for the piece of plastic at the back there, but this is a 3UZ, they only have the 2 mounting points over there. Right, so now we've gone through there, we come down through here, and then we're gonna have a bunch of stuff breaking out at the bottom over here, all right? First thing I'm gonna go through is the earth strap. So that bolts onto this M6 bolt over here. Your engine, if it's a 3UZ, these should be threaded holes, but they should have no bolt in them. I've got bolts in here because I use the same engine for 1UZ VVT-i because they use the M8 bolt over there. 3UZ M6, 1UZ VVT-i M8, okay? Also coming down here is going to be your Lambda sensor. So you can see it down there where my finger is over there. Now, word of warning, there is a metal shield that goes between the exhaust and this connector. You must put that in because if you don't, this connector is going to end up against the exhaust, and I don't need to explain to you exactly what's going to happen then. You're going to melt the connector. There's 12 volts and grounds in there. You're going to short it out and you're going to cause problems and fuses are going to blow, etc. So please make sure you put that metal shield back in, and please make sure you put the connector in behind the metal shield. You can see the Lambda sensor actually there where my finger is there. So it faces that way and it pops up and then it plugs into that connector over there. All right. Now, the first of our additions is the gearbox harness. So that comes out over there. There, it's labeled as gearbox, goes to a 4-pin DTM plug, and then we have the other side over there. So I'm just going to quickly run around because I have to go this way anyway. And you'll see there, so again, it's labeled as gearbox, so nice and easy for you guys. Moves along down through here, and we get our reverse switch. Again, so this is specific for a J160. We can make them for an R154. If you have a BMW gearbox, you can have that. And the reason we've put them on a plug like that is you guys change your mind. We know you do. We've got enough experience now. And so basically, if you wanted to start off on a J160 and then move to a BMW gearbox, we could then supply you with a section for your BMW gearbox. Just remember, the guys like the BMW and the Nissan gearbox do not have speed sensors on. So we'd just be fitting a reverse switch, and then we'd be using the ABS ECU to get the speed signal if that was the case. Coming further along down there, and then you're going to see there's the familiar Toyota speed sensor. It's the same one that's used on an R154. As a matter of fact, both of these connectors are exactly the same on an R154 and a J160 as well. Probably the same on a W58, to be fair to you as well. Right, so that's that little section over there. So moving along the plastic over here, you're going to see we've got this little plug at the top over there. And you'll see there we've actually replaced the entire knock wires because they were obviously in pretty bad shape there. So that then goes underneath the intake. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut to a photograph. So you can see it goes underneath there, and then it goes to the starter motor, and then it goes to knock 1, and then it goes to knock 2. All right, so that's what it looks like underneath the intake. Now, while you're under the intake as well, guys, please remember that you do have your ACIS, which is this little valve over here. There's the connector over there, which then connects to a vacuum solenoid valve, which is underneath the intake. Now then, that's the perfect time to test that that thing does work, okay? So, nice and simple for you. If you look at the plug that I have here, you have a white thick wire and you have a blue with the white tracer wire. The white thick wire, that's 12 volts. The blue with the tracer, with the white tracer, that's ground. So if you've got exactly the same setup here, and it looks exactly the same, then your black is 12 volts and your white is ground. Use a battery on the floor, supply the solenoid with 12 volts and ground, and you should hear it click. If you don't hear it click, now's the time to replace it. There's nothing worse than getting it all back together, starting up your car, and finding that the valve doesn't do that. Okay, you lose a lot of low down power, so especially if it's a daily driving vehicle, it's going to have a bad time if that's not working. So when the intake is off, to put the sub harness on for the knock and starter, that is your chance to test it and make sure that everything works. Okay. Moving further on the plastic over here, now you're going to see we have another little breakout section over here. We have another earth strap over here, again on the M6 hole. If you've got a 3UZ, this will be blank. It's a threaded hole, but you're not going to have a bolt in there, obviously. You're only going to have the M6 bolt going in over there. Also coming out here is going to be your accelerator pedal wire. Now, as you know, with the 3UZ, they are completely drive-by-wire. There's absolutely no accelerator cable that's going to be used in this particular case. Now, what we have done is obviously put on a plug for you, so it's labeled pedal and pedal. And in this case, we are supplying the customer with an IS250/350 accelerator pedal that he's going to then fit inside his vehicle. So again, completely unpluggable. So if you want to pull the whole engine out or the harness out, you can unplug that. You can unplug the gearbox and you can pull the whole engine harness off without having to take all of those out. Okay, so that's that little section over there. So moving along, we get to the end of the plastic now and we end up at injector 8 and coil 8. Okay. Moving further along, it's going to break out about here and then we're going to end up at injector 6. Coil 6 and the ACIS vacuum solenoid valve plug. This usually clips in here. I just don't clip it in here because we take these inlets off all the time. Right, moving further along, we then get into the middle for our breakout over here, and then it's going to break out to the cam sensor for the right bank, so exactly the same as the other side over there. It's also going to go to injector 4, coil 4, and then also your noise filter pops out here as well, so you again just bolt that onto there. Again, if you don't have it, you can just tuck it in there. It's not a problem. All right. Now then, moving along there, and you'll see what we've done here is we've used a P-clamp. So obviously you used to have that sort of horrible conduit stuff over here, and you said there's two big clips that used to hold it on there. We obviously swap it out for a P-clamp. You also have a mounting point over there, so you can put a P-clamp over there as well, and over there to keep it nice and neat. I prefer this route because obviously once we get rid of that sort of conduit, if you will, obviously it's a much thinner harness, so using a P-clamp clips it much, much better. Okay. But moving along there, then we get to the front over here, and we've got quite a lot of breakouts over here. So let's start with them. So I'm going to start here at the top, and that is going to be your drive-by-wire. So there's your drive-by-wire plug, simple little 2-pin plug, nothing too fancy there. Makes its way down, breaks out over here. Then we have our coolant temperature sensor. So that's a 2-wire sensor over there, plugs straight into your coolant temperature sensor. We then have our oil control valve for the right bank. So that's coming out there, and that plugs into there. We then also have our coil number 2. And we have our injector number 2, which is just, there you go, you can see the blue plug over there, so that's all good. Moving further along here, then we have another breakout, and that is going to be our mass airflow sensor. All right, so again, there are differences between the LS and the GS and the SC, so please make sure you get the correct mass airflow sensor for your vehicle. Down in the description, I think I put the part numbers for both or 3 of them, and so you shouldn't have any issues there if you need to get hold of one. Right, then the harness moves down. Obviously, I'm pulling a bit here because I'm trying to get the airbox up so we can see everything as I go through it. When we actually started, this will be down. But anyway, the harness carries on down through here. And as you will see here at the bottom, it breaks out there. It goes to your alternator plug, which is over there. It also goes to your Lambda plug, which is over there. So remember, we've remapped out the secondary Lambdas. So you're only using the primary Lambda sensors because that's the one the ECU uses for fueling. So obviously you can't map those out. All right, and lastly, we have our oil level sensor plug, okay? Now, because the GS and the SC have the front sump, and even was an LS, you'd have to convert it to the front sump to work in an IS200, 300 Altezza. That means that your oil level sensor is going to be here. So obviously, we put the plug in the correct place to match up with your oil level sensor with your front sump, so that plugs in there, and that all works as it should. Right, so that is the total layout. Let me get out of the way of the airbox there. That is the total layout. Extra things that you guys need to do is you need to connect the main power for the alternator. So what I mean by that is this bolt-on wire over here. So normally you just take it down from there, run it along the subframe. Again, this is depending on left or right-hand drive, because if it's left-hand drive, then obviously the battery's over there, so you just run it straight from there to there. This is going to be right-hand drive, so you can run a thick cable down there, up through there, and this is the connection for your alternator. All right, that little bolt there, M10 nut on there. Sorry, M6 nut on there, 10 socket that used to loosen it. Anyway, but there's that wire. It goes down along there, under the engine and onto the alternator, okay? The last one is the main starter power cable, which obviously we've already taped up for you guys. It's just coming out there, goes along through there, and I'm just making sure it doesn't touch, but it goes directly onto your battery. Now, do remember, this fuse box has its own power supply, and that's this little section over here. So normally when you're wiring it back up again, this one has little sort of hooks on it, if you will, that hook up. So this one goes on top of that one on your terminal, on a standard IS200 terminal. So this one is underneath, that one is on top. That one then goes down there and goes into your fuse box. So you must connect that one, otherwise your whole car's not going to have power. And then lastly, you have your earth cable, which goes down there, goes under the battery, bolts to the chassis, goes down, and then bolts to the block. So you're going to reconnect that all, okay? Because that's going to be your main earth for your block of your engine. The only other earth that I would advise you to connect is if you take a look at the top there where your brake booster pipe used to go along there, there's actually an earth point. And you'll remember from your 1G engine that effectively there was a little earth, like a braided earth strap that went from there to the cylinder head. You can do exactly the same thing in this case, and you can just use either the M8 bolt over there or even the M8 bolt over here, to be honest. It really doesn't matter. Use one of those and it always helps. More earths are always better for a Toyota. So you don't ever worry about putting too many earths on. But that's what I would advise, apart from the earth strap that goes from the gearbox to the chassis leg. So chassis leg to gearbox bolt, that's your one earth. Back of the cylinder head to the firewall, that's your second earth. And your one from your negative of your battery underneath your battery to the block, that's your main earth, okay? If you want, you can also replace that earth, because this earth is quite thin from the standard IS200. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I've used it plenty of times. It works 100%, but if you wanted to, you can feel free to make a thicker cable that will run from there and bolt directly to the block, okay? Right, so that is the layout of the harness. So what I gotta do now is move the airbox, get everything ready, because we're gonna go into the testing, and part of that testing is we're going to be running the engine. So I need to get the whole engine set up ready to run. So let me do that, and I'll be back in a second, guys. Right guys, now we're back for the testing, and as I said, it's going to be made up of two sections. One with just the ignition on, quite boring, and the other one is with the engine running, a bit more exciting. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is go through all the tests so you know exactly what's coming up, and then what we're going to do is jump into the test with the ignition on, and then what we're going to do is go to the test with the engine running. I just need to let the engine run for a bit because I think the coolant temperature gauge has gone all the way down, and that's obviously one of the tests that we need to do with the engine running. So starting at the top here, we've got ambient temperature. That's the outside temperature. So we're going to go look at our little climate control thingy there and make sure we're seeing a temperature. Then we're going to do check engine light, charge light, and oil pressure light. So we're looking for the check engine light to appear there, charge light over there. You can actually see the outline of it. And then we have the oil light down here. Now then, little caveats with the engine lights. You do need to take the dash out because there are a few lights you need to remove. Basically TRC, okay? The IS200 TRC and the GS and the LS and the SE had vehicle stability control, which is a much more advanced system. So unfortunately, there's no communication between the IS and the 3UZ traction control. I wouldn't worry too much. Traction control was super basic and didn't really do much, in all honesty. So you need to remove the TRC bulb because that's just going to keep flashing and that's going to annoy the hell out of you. So please remember to do that as part of your process. Just pull the dash out, pull the TRC bulb up, put the dash back in. Bob's your uncle, everybody's happy. Right, then we're going to test the reverse. So all I'm going to do, as this wire is already in here, I'm just going to bridge this two over here, and we're going to get our usual annoying IS200 reverse beep. What that's telling me is that basically from this terminal all the way inside the vehicle, the reverse switch is 100%. That means you put it into reverse and your reverse switch is working on your gearbox, you're going to get reverse lights on the car. So that's gravy. Next up is speedo. So what we're going to do, again, if you've seen our other videos, we're going to force feed a speed signal down our speed sensor plug over there, and it's going to cause the dash speedo to operate. So we know that's working 100% as well. Little tip for you guys. I've noticed sometimes, I think the gearboxes get bashed around a bit when people do conversions, but if you are having no speed on your dash, a really quick, easy test that you can do at home without having to lay out any kind of money at all is basically unbolt the speed sensor from the gearbox, tape a drill to it, put the ignition on, tell your friend to sit in the car and spin the drill. If he doesn't see any speed coming through there, then more than likely the speed sensor is at fault. If you do get speed through there, then clearly there's something wrong in the gearbox that's not spinning that speed sensor that's in the back of the gearbox. So it's a nice, quick, free test that you guys can do to establish where the problem actually is, because diagnostics is better than parts canon. Okay. So that's the speedo. Next up, we're going to say, I say OBD2 test. We're just going to make sure the OBD2 communicates, that it picks up that it's a GS430, because remember, it is plugged into the standard OBD2 location in the IS200. So there's no separate OBD2 connectors. You plug it in like you would your normal IS200. Nothing funny there at all. Really straightforward. Then what we're going to do is we're going to test the AC clutch. So I'm going to use the machine here to activate the clutch, because the AC magnetic clutch relay is being controlled via the ECU. Now, in order to make sure that the AC does work, as long as everything is connected correctly. Now, I do repeat, everything. The pressures have to be working, the whole 9 yards. What we're going to do is we are going to go into our live machine here, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to press the AC button. When I do that, I can see the live data on the ECU, and it's going to tell me AC signal goes from off to on. Push the button again, and it goes from on to off. Okay, that tells me that the ECU, because obviously we've remapped the MPX data to work with the IS200, because there are differences between the GS430 and the IS200/300. So all the MPX data has been remapped to match the IS200. So I want to see that, so I know that the ECU and the car are communicating properly via MPX. So that's all the tests with the ignition on, and then we're going to move to start with the engine running, as you can see there. Okay. First of all, starter circuit, pretty self-explanatory. We make sure that when we turn the key to the start position that the engine starts, okay? As you can see, all I've done is connected the main power cable to the battery, and I've plugged in all my plugs in the ECU box, so there's nothing else connected. So again, if you do that in your car and I turn the key and this engine starts, yours should do exactly the same, okay? Then once the engine started up, we're going to test the ACIS, or acoustic control induction system. So that is going to make this valve go down there. I have a really good video on the ACIS system. I pull a whole intake apart so you guys can actually see what's going on. Again, that's going to be down in the description there. Like I said, there's going to be a ton of videos there for you guys that you can know how everything works. Once we've done that, we're going to do a drive-by-wire test. What I mean by that is I'm just going to press the accelerator and it's going to rev up. I'm happy. I know everything is working as it should do. We're going to go back to the machine here and we're going to test each oil control valve. So there's 2 oil control valves, bank 1, bank 2, left bank, right bank, however you want to call it basically. And the machine will test one by one. And what's going to happen is the engine will make a horrible noise as it advances and retards the cam. Right, so that's what we're looking for. It'll be nice, idling, smooth. We press the button and it's going to go really lumpy and horrible. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to test all the injectors and coils. Now then, if you weren't aware, on a 3UZ, and I'm pretty sure this is all of them, but if you unplug a coil, the ECU then determines, because it's got ignition feedback signal, so that's how it tells which cylinder is misfiring when you get a misfire, or that is, should I say, it tells you when a coil is not firing, when the coil is faulty. Now what the ECU will do is it'll shut down the injector for that cylinder, because obviously, why would you want an injector firing on a cylinder that's not firing the spark plug, okay? So I only unplug the injectors. Reason being is that if I started unplugging the coils, I'd slowly but surely kill the engine as I went from one to one. But if I unplug the injector, we can hear the misfire, and I know that every single cylinder is firing exactly as it should. So that's our injector/coils test. I just wanted to explain, because obviously I'm not going to pull the coils off, and I wanted you to understand why. Then we're going to pop back and we're going to go to our tachometer, rev counter. You say potato, I say potato. So there, we're going to make sure that we have it. I'll probably give a bit of a rev to make sure it's going up and down as it should do there. Okay, and as I said before, that box that's in the ECU box, it is adjustable. So if you're not happy with the way the rev counter is displaying, you can use an OBD2 machine to get live engine RPM data. And if it's not 100% accurate, you can adjust that little box over there. So don't fret about that at all. Then we're going to make sure that our coolant temp is working. So again, that's why I said before I go to the running test, I'm going to make sure the engine is sort of mostly up to temp so we can see that, because I also want to see the coolant temp actually rise up as we go through these little tests. And when we come back, you'll see it's actually moved. So you guys don't think I've just sort of lobbed it in one place. Then lastly, we're going to go to diagnostics. And what I want to do is, you can clearly see we've got no automatic gearbox on here. We should have 0 codes because we've actually remapped out the entire automatic gearbox. So we're going to have absolutely no trouble codes whatsoever. So that means when you get this harness, if you plug it in and you go to start it up and your check engine light stays on when it's running, you have a code that needs resolving. Okay, so again, you should have absolutely no codes. We've remapped out the secondary Lambda sensors. We've remapped out the automatic gearbox. Obviously, we've increased the power, made the throttle more responsive, all of that type of jazz as well. But that's the important part. So the reason I'm saying diagnostics on here is I'm going to show you on the machine that there's absolutely 0 codes on this ECU, even with the engine running. Okay, right, so let's get into doing the test with the ignition on, because that is the boring part. So nice and simple. I'm just going to come here and I'm going to take my key and I'm going to turn it to ignition on. Nice and simple there. Let's pop over to here and let's see. Oh, look at that. We've got 13 degrees displaying on the outside temperature. So that is working. Now, because we're using a standard Toyota ECU, that is actually being sensed by the thing. So that is going to give you an accurate reading of what the temperature outside is, or at least behind your bumper where the sensor is. All right. So let's move on, and we want to do check engine light, charge light, and oil pressure. And lo and behold, check engine light, charge light, battery light, alternator light, whatever you want to call it, and your oil pressure light. Now, this is the red one. Remember, you have an orange one for oil level. This is the important one. If this one comes on, you're in trouble. All right. So that are those lights over there. So let's pop over and let's start doing the reverse. So as I said, I'm literally just going to bridge the switch over here, and we're going to hear our familiar little beep. So there you go. Take that off, and there it is. Fantastic. Right, let's get that out of the way because there's 12 volts floating around there. Right, so that is reversed. Let's go ahead and do our speedo. So again, you've seen this device before if you watch any of our other videos. What I'm testing is these 3-wire sensors are like a Hall effect sensor. So they've got 12 volts, ground, and signal. And they're obviously doing signal processing in the speed sensor. So what I want to do with this is I want to test the 12 volts, the ground, and the speed signal so that all 3 wires are correct. So if you bear with me a second, I'm just going to put the power and the ground wires in. And while I do that, you can take a look at the cluster there. Rightio. This is always fun with one hand. Okay, let me get myself into position here. Right, so I can see I've got my LED flashing, so I know my 12 volts and my ground are working perfectly. So all I'm going to do now is I'm basically going to touch the yellow wire, which is currently outputting a test signal. And I'm going to touch it on here, and basically it's going to make the speedo work. So let me try and get back so you can see. There you go. So I'm just touching the yellow wire on the last pin, and there the speedo works. Put them both in the same picture there. There you go. Take that off, put that on. Fantastic. Okay, let's again pop that out. So we're going to have floating 12 volts and fuses blowing. Right, okay, so that is the speedo test. Let's pop into the OBD2 machine and let's see what we can see. So again, these machines are incredibly slow. So I have actually already got in it how to auto detect the vehicle and all that type of jazz. You don't want to be stuck here for 10 minutes while this thing tries to load up. So just to show you that it is all working, I'm going to go into System Select, and you're going to see here that it does pick up as a GS430. So although I'm plugged into the standard IS200 OBD2 port, TechStream will pick it up as a GS430 because it communicates with the ECU, okay? We're going to go back into engine and ECT now, or engine and electronic control transmission, which in this case doesn't have. Right, but let's go over to AC clutch. So what we want to do now is we want to actually activate the output in the ECU, which will then turn on the AC magnetic clutch relay, which tells me that the AC system is working and the engine ECU or the GS430 ECU is controlling it. So we want to go into active test over here. We want to go into AC magnetic clutch relay. We'll pop into there. Now I'm going to keep quiet for this because obviously you're trying to hear a relay click, which is basically by the ECU. So let me go over there because it's just over there next to the ECU. 3, 2, 1. Right, hopefully you heard that, but I did it a couple of times on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off. So now, super happy because obviously I'm using the OBD2 machine. That tells me that the engine ECU is able to activate the AC magnetic clutch relay. Now then, that's one part of the story. What we want to do know is that if you press the AC button inside the vehicle, that the ECU understands that that is exactly what has happened. Now, in order to make this a very short process, because this machine is a little bit slow, unfortunately, mainly when you choose lots of data to view. So I'm gonna remove some of the data, and let's just get down to what is important. So let's go down to here. I'm looking for AC signal. Fantastic. And click on OK. Right, so we're going to limit ourselves there. So we've got engine speed, we've got coolant temp, and we've got AC signal. So at the moment, you can clearly see that that is off. I'm going to pop over here, press the AC button, that little LED comes on, and you can see that goes to on. And if I press it again, let me just stay on here. There you go, and it goes off, and you can see the AC button no longer has the LED lit up there. Fantastic. Okay. So that's pretty much it. I'm super happy. The ECU is able to turn the AC magnetic clutch relay on, which will then activate the aircon pump. And obviously the request from the vehicle to the engine ECU to tell it to do that is working 100%. So remember, the only other connection is a pressure switch. So do bear in mind that if the pressure is not correct, the AC system will not work. So if yours doesn't work, check your pressure first and make sure that that is all correct and within spec. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let the engine warm up a little bit. Because what I'm going to do then is I want a little bit more coolant temperature on here. It is just slightly above the needle, but it's very difficult to see. So I'm going to let it run for like 5 minutes, come back, and then we'll come back when it's a little bit hotter. So let me go away and I'll see you guys in a second. Right guys, so now back, I've got my ear protection on, so I don't have to go deaf with the engine running over here. So quick recap, we're going to do the starter circuit, basically turn the key, make sure it starts. ACIS, we want to make sure that this valve goes like so. Drive-by-wire, I'm just going to rev the pedal like that, or rev the engine. Oil control valve, we'll test it with the OBD2 machine. Injectors and coils, I'm going to pull each one off one by one so you can hear them misfiring. Tacho, we're going to make sure we get a rev counter signal through there. Coolant temp, we're going to make sure we get a coolant temp through there. And obviously diagnostics, we'll make sure we've got no code on there. So without further ado, let's get this cranked on. You can see all our lights are on, and 3, 2, 1. So, starter circuit. You can see our valve has gone down. That is brilliant. Okay. Drive-by-wire test. Brilliant. Let's go on to oil control valve test. So let's go back into here. We're going to go into active test. We're going to scroll down. VVT-i control bank 1. And go back into active test. Bank 2. Brilliant. Oil control valve, injectors and coils. So let's go on. Yes, this is number 8, number 6, number 4, number 2. Rightio. And we've got number 7, number 5, number 3, and then we're going to have number 1, which is incredibly difficult to get to. Fantastic. Okay. So coming back now, we've done injectors. So let's see our tacho. So you can see we've got our tacho signal coming through there. About right, like 600-700 RPM. That works brilliantly. Right, so that's tacho. Coolant temp, you can see that's massively climbed now. We were on about 60 degrees. We're now on about 72 degrees over there. So that's looking about right and correct over there. Right, so now we're going to do diagnostics. So let's go into our DTCs. And you can see we've got absolutely 0 codes. You go depending, I think it'll be diagnostic or it'll be misfire codes. Yeah, you see all the misfires from when we were doing the testing over there. So let me just quickly turn the ignition off. I'm going to take that off. Sorry, hopefully you can hear me there. But yeah, so we've got no current codes. The pending codes are basically the codes from where I was unplugging everything, so it's picking up a misfire. That's obviously normal. That's what I would expect to see. Okay, but no codes related to engine, gearbox, or anything on the engine at all that is completely relevant. You can see that the check engine light stayed off the whole time the engine was running, and that's exactly what you guys should be experiencing when this is plugged in and running. So if you do get a check engine light, there is an issue. You will need to get your diagnostics machine and you will need to check it out. Unfortunately, for the European and US 3UZ ECUs, you cannot do diagnostics by bridging the 2 terminals in the OBD2 port. It is frustrating, but yeah, we are stuck. The Japanese guys can, we can't, we got shafted. So basically, you will need an OBD2 machine of some sorts in order to communicate with the engine ECU in order to read diagnostic codes and live data, okay? There's one thing you can do though, by bridging those 2 pins. Whether it's relevant to you or not, you can decide. But if you do bridge those 2 pins, which is pin 4 and 13 or 5 and 13, doesn't really matter which one it is, you will still put the ECU into diagnostic mode and you will still lock the timing at 10 degrees. So you can see down here, you've got 0, 5, 10 and 15 degrees over there. I've marked my crank pulley with a nice bright white mark, which obviously isn't going to be visible now. But anyway, on your crank pulley, you have a mark that you can make and mark nice and white so you can see it. Well, I can actually see it just ever so slightly over there. You can see it over there. I use Tip-X or whatever you guys call a correction fluid. And made that all nice and white so you can see everything there. So if you are unsure or you think you may have jumped a tooth of timing, and remember these interference engines, so they might not end well for you, but technically speaking, you could bridge those 2 pins, put into diagnostic mode, use the timing light on cylinder 1 and go from there. So that means that if you do bridge those 2 terminals, you must remember to take it off before you drive off, because you're going to lock the timing at 10 degrees, which is going to mean that you're going to have a terrible time. You're going to lose all that power and you're not going to be happy. Now, to bridge those 2 terminals, if you have a pre-2001 IS200, you're going to have this little diagnosis port on here. And all you got to do is, if you look inside here, I don't know if you can see there, but it says E1, where I'm making my shadow go E1, and then TC in the middle there. So it's basically this one in the middle there, and that one over there. You bridge those. It's doing the same as bridging pin 4 or 5 and 13 on the OBD2 port inside the car. That'll put it into diagnostic mode. It's not going to make your check engine light flash or anything weird like that. It'll probably cause your ABS lights to flash and all that type of jazz because they're also going into diagnostic mode. But yeah, so then you can check your timing. But that's pretty much all you can do on the 3UZ with that particular thing, because you can't do the flashing of the check engine light to read the codes the old-fashioned way. Right, so hopefully that's super helpful to the customer who's going to be installing this on his harness, on his obviously swap into his IS200. Like I said, we built in lots of functionality for upgradability, so obviously you can change the gearbox harness and all that type of jazz. We do have the ECU headers for these particular setups, so if the event ever arose that you wanted to have an aftermarket ECU, by all means we can make you a patch harness to Link, Haltech, ECU Master, whatever you want, and obviously you can swap over and do that. One thing I would bear in mind, guys, is if you are going to use an aftermarket ECU and you want to use it on one of these harnesses, do bear in mind adding stuff onto the harness is obviously not doable unless we actually adapt the original engine harness. If you're happy with the engine as it is, you just want to use an aftermarket ECU to control it better, by all means, and you don't want to change coils, you don't want to change injectors, you don't want to do anything like that, that is the way to go. You can change injectors and coils by changing the plugs, obviously, that is that, but that obviously requires harness modification. It's not something that you can do as like a little patch harness through there, all right? But yeah, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to write them down below. I try and get to the comments as much as I can to try and answer your guys' questions. If you'd like information on this particular harness and what it costs, obviously just give us a shout. Do bear in mind, guys, we do these for all of the 3UZs, and just in the European and US market alone, there are 6 variations of 3UZ between LS, GS, and SC. And then obviously you got the Japanese version. So you got Celsius, you got Crown, you've got some, I think this, yeah, the SC430. I think there was I don't think there was a Sora 430. I think it became the SC, or Lexus entered Japan at that particular time. So again, don't quote me on that. I haven't got the information in front of me. But anyway, point is, there's a lot of types of 3UZs. If you are asking us for a quote, please be aware of that and make sure that you either have one of two things. Either you know the exact year and model of the donor engine, or even better than that is to take a photo of your ECU with the part number showing. Send that over to us in the beginning. I know exactly what we're working with then. Make process a lot smoother, because obviously we did post a couple of things on Facebook and we got a influx of messages, and I'm having to message people 3 or 4 times to try and get the information out of there, which obviously slows the process down. So if you guys can give us as much information as is humanly possible, obviously sometimes you guys don't know, that is perfectly fine, and obviously you can ask us questions and we can get it there. But things like if you can give us the ECU part number of the engine that you want to work with, that saves a lot of time and hassle. Then we know exactly what we're dealing with. Okay, but thanks for watching, guys. Again, we don't know what you don't know. So if you have suggestions for videos, put it down in the bottom there. And if we have this particular setup again, that we can do a video on a particular thing that you want to know about, then we'll do it for you. So thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you again later. Bye-bye.